Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It was much later and much skimpier than perhaps Adam Jones thought he'd be getting his free agency deal. I think we all realized last summer the market would be changing, and certainly into last winter. But I know Adam Jones sat before you last year at FanFest and said he was looking forward to free agency. Free agency, not so good on the other side of 30, is it, Luke Jones?
It really isn't, and this is the latest example of that, and it's why you and I have talked so much about the changing, shifting economics of baseball in terms of what teams are valuing. And, we can talk, we've talked about the possibility of collusion and different things like that, but you look at Adam Jones at this stage, and let's be very clear about this. There's been a lot of hyperbole thrown out there about Jones, and people still referring to him as a superstar, an all-star player. Adam Jones isn't a superstar anymore. Adam Jones is a former five-time All-Star, a former Gold Glove center fielder, one of the favorites of mine that I've covered on the Orioles beat, someone who's been so important to this city and has been a really, really good player for a long time. Adam Jones isn't that same player anymore, and I want to be very clear about that. Now, that said, that understood that Adam Jones is just kind of an okay player at this point if you take the name off the resume and just look at what the numbers have been the last couple years. That said, is he worth more than 1 year, $3 million? Yeah, I'd like to think so. Is he someone that was deserving of a job before March 10th? Absolutely. Do I think he still has something to offer to a team that is trying to contend or has some young players to, kind of lead by example? Sure, absolutely, 100%. So I'm glad to see him get a job finally. I certainly am disappointed to see that it took this long, but Adam Jones is the example of the type of player that this market just strictly is not valuing as much as it once did. And will that change at some point in time? Well, do they change the front end of the system with arbitration and club control and when players can hit free agency? I think that's what's going to be key for players fitting into that group of Adam Jones that still productive to some degree, but far from what they were in their prime. And I think that's what Adam Jones, who is one of many players to experience the pain of that this offseason and going back to last winter as well.
Well, where else was he going to go, right? I mean, we wind up in Arizona. I guess that was part of the thing. When you're an outfielder, you're a pitcher, you can almost kind of wind up anywhere, right? I mean, the need isn't as specific. And for him, it was probably more about, are you going to play me or are you going to platoon me? Am I going to end the season with 320 at-bats? Because I don't know that Adam Jones would like that very much, even in a winning or a losing environment. And then I go back to the Orioles and say, for $3 million, they should have just kept him. That's how I felt about it, and that's just me being me at this point. But over $3 million, if I own the Orioles, I would just bring him on to my last place team, give him 600 at-bats, and give people a reason to come to the ballpark. I don't know what else to say. Put him on the wall. I don't know. But over $3 million, it feels like the Orioles squandered this by letting him go over $3 million.
Is he signing with the Orioles for 1 year, $3 million, though? That's my question.
Probably not at this point because the feelings are all hurt, I'm sure.
Well,
right?
I mean, I don't know how much of it's feelings.
Well, if he wanted to stay here,
same
money being the same, he could have stayed here, lived in Ripken's house. His wife could have kept her. He could have kept as is over $3 million. He's worth $3 million to the Orioles this year, whether they win 55 games or 59 wins.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you over saying if the Orioles brought him back on a 1 year, let's say $5 million deal, that it would be something that's crippling to the organization or anything like that. But here's the thing, Nestor. The one area where they actually have some positional talent that is, if not fully Major League ready, at least close, is the outfield. Cedric Mullins is probably going to be the starting center fielder, so we've already established that. And they're once again going to have Trey Mancini kind of sort of hanging out in left field again because they have a logjam with Chris Davis at first base, and Mark Trumbo is coming back from knee surgery. I think they have some ideas that they might be able to deal him at some point this year, but they have that logjam there. And as a result, you have Mancini who's probably going to be hanging out in left field again, at least some this year. So the problem is, you can re-sign Adam Jones and have him play right field, and you can do that. But at the same time, come July, we're going to be talking about trading him again.
Oh, of course, yeah. And he won't have much value.
You're going to be doing that whole thing again. And look, Mike Elias should be doing that whole thing. Any veteran player that Elias is signing, you should be thinking about the possibility of flipping him at this point. I mean, that's just where the Orioles are at this point. If you truly want to try to rebuild it and do it right, that's where they are. So if you bring Jones back in, then you have completely cut off any everyday opportunity for an Austin Hayes or a Yusniel Diaz come June or July, which I think is very well possible for him. He was reassigned over the weekend, but he had a good spring. I think he's someone who could be in Baltimore sooner rather than later. But you knew they weren't going to manipulate his service time at the beginning of the season, and he hasn't played above Double-A, so it's not a Vlad Guerrero Jr. kind of situation with him. But I just think if you bring Jones back, one, what's in it for him other than, okay, he does get to stay in Baltimore, but he's going to be on a god-awful team. He experienced that last year. You're going to be talking about potentially trading him again. Does he have a great chance to win in Arizona? Well, they traded Goldschmidt, and they've lost some other key pieces there. Corbin's gone, and
they're not winning. Come on, man. I mean, come on.
But they're going to win a heck of a lot more than the Orioles. Is my point. So
68 will be a heck of a lot more. 72.
Well, I don't think Arizona's that bad either.
Okay.
But the point is, I'm not sure. I'm not sure 1 year, $3 million was going to get anything with Adam Jones remotely done here in Baltimore. And as far as the whole bringing fans out, Nestor, the writing was on the wall last September that Adam Jones was probably in his last days as the Orioles, and no one came to the ballpark then. So are they selling a couple extra 100 tickets maybe a game for people to come watch Adam Jones? Maybe. But
they are in the business of making their fan base happy to some degree, even though that's not the business they're in. So I just felt like for Adam Jones over $3 million, I'm just talking out loud. I'm not even saying they should have or he could have or he would have. But in the end, he's going to go play somewhere in irrelevancy. He would have been worth more to the Orioles than he's worth to the Diamondbacks. I mean, that's just me speaking the truth, and that whether it's feasible or logical or emotions work into that, but to watch him sort of slip out to Arizona and play in the middle of the night when he would have had some value here, that's just kind of a shame. That's all. I mean, it was a shame Eddie Murray ever went and played for the Dodgers, right? I mean, it was a shame Ed Reed ever went and played for Houston or whatever, right? But it's where it is. And
sure. And look, I'm making the argument to say why you don't do it, but if we were waking up and talking about this on a Monday morning after the news comes out and saying that the Orioles re-signed him, then fine.
How about this, man? When your mother or your sister or my wife goes to the ballpark this year, my wife won't be going to. Having Adam Jones there would be better for a lot of them in a year when you're going to win 59 years than not. That's just.
Sure.
That's just simple. It's like going to see a band where, like, the original Steve Perry's in the band. It's better, you think, until you get there, and then Steve Perry can't sing, and that might not be so good. But, I mean, either way, the Orioles can't sing this year. Sure. So at least play some of the songs I like or so. I don't know. I mean, over $3 million measly bucks to Adam Jones. It's just a shame. That's all. I mean,
for me, what's a shame is that the Orioles deteriorated to the point that they did last year, and where this thing just crashed and burned to such a dramatic degree. If they were in a position where they had sold off Manny Machado a year earlier than they did, and traded Zach Britton a year earlier than they did, when they should have done this in 2017 when it was pretty clear that this thing was coming to an end very, very rapidly, and maybe it wasn't a scorched earth kind of rebuild. Then maybe you keep Adam Jones around, and okay, you're probably going to be a 90-loss kind of team. But you keep Jones around, and maybe he hangs around for a year or two, and maybe you're in a position because you sold much higher on getting pieces for Manny Machado and Britton and some of the other guys that have moved on since then, that maybe they would have expedited the rebuild process. I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I don't really a spot in the outfield, at least somewhat. You have Mullins in center field, and my hope is that Austin Hayes, who's having a good spring, is maybe not the starting right fielder on opening day, but he's in Baltimore sooner rather than later. And then you have Diaz, and you can talk about other guys that might force the Orioles' hand. I mean, Anthony Santander's had a good spring. And
By the way, it is fascinating 2-3 weeks into this now. We're getting up on St. Patrick's Day, and we're going to pull names out of the hat on Sunday, and Maryland's going to land somewhere and all that stuff. That we're now piecing together what the team is, right? Like, we didn't talk about the Santanders and the Austin Hayeses in October, November, December. We were talking football, and we're talking Lamar and all of that. And now, the Ravens are going to do whatever they're going to do, and it's going to be a wild week around here for Mosley or Weddle's in L.A. We're going to watch the Joe Flacco press conference probably before the end of the week, somewhere out there in the Mile High area. All this is going to happen, but the focus really is opening day's 2 weeks away, right? And now what happens, who's where, who's in the order, where's Adam Jones going to play, where's Machado playing, where are all those guys, and where's Chris Davis as well? I know that's going to be the big question here, is whether he's going to be in the lineup opening day and how he's treated around here. But, this Brandon Hyde guy who we don't know, he has to fill a lineup out on opening day, and they're going to be playing baseball up here every day 3 weeks from now. And I'm not sure that most people around here even know who these guys are.
Yeah, I mean, I think most Orioles fans have at least heard the name Austin Hays. He's had a really good spring. How does that translate if he makes the 25-man roster and is the starting right fielder hypothetically? Who knows? He'll probably struggle, because that's what many rookies do when they're at the major league level. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of anonymity going on right now. I mean, it's one of those things where the Orioles are playing spring training games. They've been on a few times. You can follow them on the official website.
Crazy me, dude, on a Sunday afternoon with nothing to do and two freaking networks. I thought they'd put an Oriole Phillies game on, but what do I know?
They were on. They were on. I think they had Saturday night's game on. I wasn't home. They had Friday's game on, but yes, no Sunday. But my point is, everyone's aware that they're playing spring games and that the season's right around the corner. But beyond a handful of names, Mancini and. Everyone knows Chris Davis.
Dude, if I did jaywalking, on Pennsylvania Avenue in Towson, right? Like, just literally stood there at Chesapeake or stood downtown at Light and Pratt and just quizzed people as they walked by to name 3 Orioles, I think they would be hard-pressed to do that. 3,
I think
literally.
They would name people that aren't Orioles anymore. I mean, that's what it would be. They would name someone who isn't on the Orioles anymore. But that's rebuilding. We know that that's where the Orioles are at this point, and it's not. There are certain parts of this that I think are going to be really interesting, but in large,
then the games are going to start, and then it's not going to be interesting anymore.
There's going to be. Look, I'm intrigued to see what the starting rotation is going to look like and how possibly using an opener fits into that. For example, I think the Orioles have a couple relievers who kind of fit the description of using an opener for whoever the number 4, number 5 starters are going to be in the rotation. I am interested to see who the starting right fielder is going to be. I'm interested to see if Austin Hays goes north with the club, and if he does, is he going to be the starting right fielder? How does Cedric Mullins do in his first full year as the starting center fielder? I have no expectation, but does Chris Davis look any different at all with a new regime and new coaching staff and analytics and possible adjustments? I know the early spring numbers have not been encouraging in that regard. Chance Sisco's had a great spring, but guess what? He had a great spring last year too. So does he look better than he did last year, which was, he was one of the big disappointments among the young players. So there are still plenty of questions, and I think there are still interesting things to look at if you look carefully enough, but it's all going to be under the cloud of losing a whole lot of ball games, and that's going to be really difficult. And for the casual fan, I don't blame them if they're not going to be completely engaged in what the Orioles are doing on a nightly basis. So there's, like I said, there's interest if you look closely enough, but you really have to look deep into the forest to really see that, because it's going to be a whole lot of losing and not a whole lot of fun when you're looking at the win-loss department. Last year certainly taught us that, and maybe they don't lose 115 games again. I don't expect them to lose that many again just because of simple probability, more so than what this team's actually looking like.
I'll bet the under on 115 losses.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just think I think it's so mathematically unlikely to lose that many again. I mean, look at some of the worst teams in the history of baseball, and they all, even by accident, kind of just improved by 7 or 8 games. But to think that the Orioles are going to avoid triple-digit losses, that would surprise me. So certainly, so you really, I mean, this is the kind of year that if you're a fan, you really need to be doing your homework, so to speak, if you're trying to drum up some interest and drum up some positives, and you just hope that Cedric Mullins and Trey Mancini maybe takes a step forward. Chance Sisco looks like a starting catcher. If Austin Hayes gets opportunities, he takes advantage of it. Yusniel Diaz later in the summer. Maybe some young pitchers break into Baltimore at some point over the course of the season. Although early on, I'm not really expecting that. But could you see a Dean Kramer come July? Maybe. So I mean, there's certainly names to monitor, but certainly not anyone of the ilk of Manny Machado arriving in 2012 or even.
And Manny Machado's arrived in San Diego and nobody notices, right? Like, there've been no tickets sold there. Bryce Harper shows up in Philadelphia and promises a parade in D.C., and they sell a couple 100,000 tickets. It is amazing how baseball is so rooted in things that happened in 1974. Like if your franchise mattered in that way and your city loves baseball, you sign Bryce Harper, everyone goes nuts. If it doesn't matter and you sign Manny Machado and you're still the only major league property in town, I didn't see any sort of hit for Padres fans because there is no history there. So they're trying to create something that's never been there before. Kind of like, I guess Jeter's trying to do in Miami or in Tampa or any Colorado giving Arenado all this money. I don't know that it really moves the needle or the meter for that matter amongst the fan base. But boy, they gave Machado a lot of money, and at some point, I'd love to say that the Padres look back 3 years from now and say they're relevant because of that. And I know they got a lot of guys on the farm, but that is a fascinating case study. The Machado Padres thing is as interesting as anything that happened in this offseason.
Yeah, it is, and I think there's a certain amount of East Coast bias compared to West Coast. I mean, in the same way that LeBron James isn't as hot of a topic because of...
Well, also the team sucks, too. That
yeah, well, sure, absolutely, and that's
Mr. Sixers fan. Mr. I spent my Sunday at a Sixers game.
Right. But I think in the case of Machado versus Harper, I mean, the Phillies had some success last year, although they had a bad September. Certainly they have much more of a pedigree, but I think in San Diego, I'm sure there's excitement among their fans that were already buying into the idea that the Padres have a heck of a farm system, and you have people there that are really missing the Chargers. But what does that look like in comparison to Philadelphia or a player like that arrives in New York or Boston or even L.A. if you want to use another West Coast team. So I'm intrigued to see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, I think it was very clear, especially our proximity to Philadelphia, what kind of jolt the Phillies got from signing Bryce Harper and seeing what kind of tickets that they've sold. In fact, I was even talking to as you know, my brother-in-law is a big Philadelphia sports fan. His dad was considering, I think, a 13-game plan right before they signed Harper, and he was kind of looking at different sections and trying to weigh, whether he was going to do 2 tickets, 4 tickets, whatever, and was on the fence. Well, they signed Bryce Harper, and he called back a couple days later. They were all out of 13-game plans. So it kind of it speaks to the excitement level there. But you're also talking about a team that has more of a history. They're 11 years removed from a World Series, so it's not like it's been forever in Philadelphia. Whereas in San Diego, I mean, 1998 was fun, and they adore Tony Gwynn to this day. God rest his soul, but there's just not a whole lot to write home about. And if you're the Padres, signing Manny Machado, coupled with the farm system that they have, that maybe it doesn't happen in 2019, but they're hoping that 2020, 2021, 2022 will be some, there's a potential to have some special seasons there. And if it doesn't work out, Well, Manny Machado will opt out in 5 years and probably wind up in New York as a 31-year-old. How about that?
He is Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore. Luke out on Twitter. All of our WNST programming. This is great that we have sponsors like this because our friends out of King Discount Liquors, they know you're going to need to drink this season, baseball season. So they're there for you. Lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Get on out to Rosedale. Give the King a ring. Also, we have a big bull roast happening up at Timonium at the fairgrounds that our friends at King Discount Liquors are involved in. It's April the 28th. It's a Sunday afternoon. I'll be there. I hope you're going to be there. Victor T spinning the tunes. So I want to tell everybody about that. If you love a good old-fashioned bull roast, and all liquor people too. So it's going to be a lot of fun. King Discount Liquors will be with it. It's April 28th. Make sure you're checking that out. Johnny Bevan, the All-Stars, always there in Rosedale for you to make sure you get the good wine like my wife got last week. Also, our friends at Fremont Mortgage, Carl Delmont will be here this week. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. If you're in the market to buy or sell a home and you need dough, you need a mortgage, you need Fremont Mortgage. You need their online education system. Buying, selling, or just thinking about it, Fremont.com has answers for you. Carl Delmont will have some answers as well. Hey, Pizza John's! You know what I did this week? I went to Pizza John's on Friday. I also saw Chad the Crab Man at Al Seafood because I go through Essex. I do all my sponsors down there. But Pizza John's, I brought the pizza home so that on Monday when they're not open, I'll be eating. I got pepperoni and mushroom this time. I didn't get any green pepper. My wife doesn't like green peppers. I wasn't in the mood for sausage. I was just feeling pepperoni and mushroom. I've never ordered a pepperoni and mushroom pizza from Pizza John's, but I did on Friday. There's still 2 slices in my fridge, and I get to enjoy it on the day when Pizza John's is closed. So there, I like that. Pizza John's, they've been doing it there for 50 years, back Riverneck Road in Essex. We are putting together a swabbing event for the spring. I'll be telling you more about that as we get later on into this. Last but never least, when the weather clears, Compass Point Golf's going to be there for you in Pasadena. You can hit 36 holes of golf in Pasadena, left side, right side of the road. Either way, Mountain Road, right down there for you. Find them at compasspointgolf.com. They also had the Irish Open over the weekend. They're open this weekend for St. Paddy's Day Fair. And they'll be doing some night golf there once the weather breaks as well, now that nights are a little longer. Compasspointgolf.com. Luke Jones is our guest. Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. Dude, we sat here for 20 minutes and we beat up Chris Davis. We talk about Adam Jones, Machado, and all that stuff. Who's going to pitch for this team? Can I ask you that now? Is it too early to ask that here in March?
No, I think it's a fascinating question. I mean, we know Bundy, Cashner, Cobb. I mean, those are going to be the top 3 for better or worse. And
that's not like horrible, right? Like, I mean, I looked at that this time last year and thought they might squeak out 85 wins, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't. I'm not trying to be too positive about the Orioles, but those are 3 guys that I think you could go around and say, okay, they're major league pitchers. And especially the way Cobb worked himself. Yeah, you can.
Right. At worst, you can talk yourself into it, right? I mean, I think you're certainly hoping Bundy bounces back from last year when he gave up, felt like 100 home runs. I mean, it just, I think that was really frustrating because you saw how good he could be the first 3 months of the season, and he had that ankle injury, and I don't think he ever really got back on track, even though he hasn't used that.
Dude, part of this for me, and I've watched this a long time, is when you stink the way they stunk last year, I don't care if you're Trey Mancini and you're playing for $100 million, if you're Adam Jones and you're playing for another $1 million on the end. I looked at Adam Jones' numbers last year, and I thought, you know what? In a place where, like, it matters and it's not, every guy in the locker room's getting asked about being traded and all that, I think he'll do better than 281, 15, 63 if they give him 600 at-bats this year. And I don't know that they will, but I think he's more of a 20 home run guy than a 15 home run guy in a regular year. He had a lot more doubles last year than he's hit in any other year in a long time. So, I look at Adam Jones and I think to myself, what does that do to a 30-year-old guy with $100 million in the bank who's going to the ballpark every day and playing on a team that might lose 120 games, and that was legitimate most of the year? I just think all of those guys can only benefit this year from 0-0, at least in the beginning. All of them, including guys like Cobb, who really stunk last year in the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean, Cobb was awful in the first half, and look at his second half ERA, though. He was very much in line with kind of what good Alex Cobb has been. Maybe not missing quite as many bats, but overall had more success. So I think the point you just made was spot on, and that's another argument for Adam Jones somewhere as far as bouncing back, and anyone else who's escaped the Orioles. I mean, about the only one who was absolved from the struggles last year was Machado with the bat. Now, you could debate his defense, but I think 4 guys that are back, guys that were on this team last year and will be on this team in 2019, at least to start. Who knows who might be dealt at some point between now and the trade deadline. But I think there is something to be said for a fresh start in the standings, and I think even more so with this organization having a fresh start, coaching staff-wise, Brandon Hyde compared to Buck Showalter, and it's not to say Hyde, one is better than the other, it's just different. And you have a different coaching staff, different eyeballs. You have certainly the analytics piece to this, specifically on the pitching side, and some of the, I think even some of the marginal guys like Jimmy Yacobonis and Jeffrey Ramirez and David Hess, with some of the things that the Orioles are due from an analytics standpoint and some of these high-definition cameras that they're using to track release point and grip and arm slot and all those different things that the Orioles were not really all that terribly compelled to do over the last few years. How does that help someone? Is there some diamond in the rough? So I think
it's a great point, by the way. Give me one pitcher and one position player that is tremendously benefited by the Mike Elias, Sig Mejdal shift that in August we look up and somebody's in the big leagues who wasn't here, or Cedric Mullins looks like an all-star, or whatever happens, then you can pin that on, the nerdery really helped this player adjust and become a better ball player. Because if there's anything I learned in reading Astro Ball, which every Oriole fan, it's sort of must reading to me.
It's become the new Bible for the Orioles rebuild, right?
I mean, if you're going to, I was the first one to read it and, threw it out the weekend he was hired on. I binge read it on Thanksgiving weekend to think, like, what's going on here? What's going on here is some young player should be dramatically affected by the science, because that's where it's at, and it's designed to make players better by giving them a better advantage before they walk out to the mound, before they walk into the batter's box, before they walk out into the field with a glove. That's the idea here. And in Houston, a lot of guys didn't buy into it either early on, but the ones who did found benefit in it. And I'm fascinated from that standpoint to sit here in August and say, hey, a star is born. Look at what Trey Mancini looks like, the old Chris Davis all of a sudden because of what they've done to him here.
Sure, and I think that's where I said if you're willing to look at the win-loss record and say, okay, it's really bad. Everyone understands it's going to be really bad, but that's where you do look for those pitchers or those hitters who have a, quote, growth mindset. And I think you kind of, what's interesting about this is you can look at Houston and look at some of the trends that were there, and understanding that other teams have tried to copy the Astros. I mean, the Orioles are doing it right now with a couple of the former Astros decision makers and movers and shakers. But I think from a pitching standpoint, you look in Houston, what did they value? Guys who had sliders, guys throwing sliders, fewer fastballs. They really valued spin rate. So that's where you start to look at, okay, what Orioles pitchers who might not have results but kind of had sliders that profiled as a good pitch. Bundy comes to mind right away. Bundy threw a lot of sliders last year, and probably you're going to see that continue, and probably fewer fastballs from him. Jimmy Yacobonis, really good slider if you look at what he was able to do last year for the Orioles. I'm guessing you'll see them lean into that a little more for him. I think David Hess has talked about throwing his breaking ball more. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, and not just the Astros. The Yankees have done this. The Orioles last year were so fastball heavy compared to so many other teams in baseball, and you kind of ask yourself why. They didn't exactly have that many pitchers with high 90s kind of stuff. I mean, you could point to Gausman and a couple other guys like that, but they had a lot of middle-of-the-road, fringe stuff kind of major league pitchers, needless to say. I mean, the results speak for themselves, but yet they were still throwing a lot of fastballs. And everything we're finding in today's game is, for teams that are really successful pitching, it's about spin rate, and not that you're not throwing fastballs, but I think you're a little more selective. And the pitchers who have that good spin rate, it's fastballs up in the zone because it's tougher to get on top of it. So I think any Orioles pitchers for me right now that have shown some evidence of being able to throw a good slider, I'm expecting slider usage to go up, and I'm expecting from that group maybe one or two guys can kind of have some success. Now, to be very clear about that, that might be David Hess going from quad A type long reliever to maybe he becomes a guy that you could say is a decent number 4 starter on a second division ball club. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be incremental. It's not going to be suddenly one of these scrub, quote scrub pitchers becomes a Cy Young Award candidate. But does David Hess, does Jeffrey Ramirez, does a Jimmy Yacobonis become their opener because of what he can do with his slider, and he's had a good spring? Those are the types of things that are going to be interesting to watch. And then on the flip side, with the offensive players, with your hitters, is there something that the Orioles can untap in a guy like Trey Mancini, who's had some really nice success for his first couple years? Can they help him get to another level, though? Can they help Cedric Mullins perhaps be better against left-handed pitching? I mean, that's been the one question about him as a switch hitter. He hasn't been good from the right side whatsoever going through the minor leagues. Can they untap something there? Is there something that Sig Mejdal and his group of analysts in the warehouse, they've uncovered that we're not even talking about yet? And you hope so, because that's really what this is about. Eventually, everyone caught on to Moneyball, and what happened? On-base percentage became really expensive as a result, and people were copying things that the Astros did. So the next thing is, now that the Orioles have introduced technology and they're introducing analytics to the coaching staff, and the coaching staff is passing it on to the players, and you're hoping that players buy in, the next step is you hope you find some more market inefficiencies that you can take advantage of. Something out there that you have discovered is valuable that other teams haven't yet discovered is valuable, and that's part of the fun of this. That isn't, it's not going to be fun in terms of wins and losses for the next couple of years, that's for sure. But there is a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that, frankly, we're probably not going to be privy to very much unless the Orioles win a World Series 3 years from now, and Ben Reiter's writing a book about the Orioles and Oriole ball. But there is the potential for...
I'm not writing that book, by the way. You can write that book.
Yeah, but I think there's a potential for some real intrigue with some guys who either were valued here, but they never realized their potential, or guys here that were, frankly, overlooked, and the new regime looks at them and say, hey, there's something to this player. What if we have him try A and B rather than what he was doing last year under the old regime, and see if it works out? And guess what? The Astros had plenty of players who didn't work out. Let's be very clear about that. There's going to be failure. There are going to be guys that they bring in that aren't going to work out. I mean, Mike Elias, what has he done this offseason in terms of player acquisitions? It's been minor league signings. They've traded international bonus slots since the Orioles didn't get Victor Mesa, and we know how that played out. But he's used a lot of the tactics that Dan Duquette used, quite frankly, and I'm saying that's a bad thing. It's just where they are in the rebuild right now. But are they able to untap some production, some success from some unlikely candidates? And if they do, then great. That's either going to accelerate the process of the Orioles getting back to relevancy, or it might be someone that they are able to then flip for other commodities, other pieces of other players that are going to add to the long-term viability of this franchise. So it's very interesting in that regard. It's very baseball, it's very nerdy. I'm not going to say it's not, but I think
it's a lot of investment in something that, with the squeeze and the juice, for what you're going to invest in the Orioles the next 3 years and what you're going to get. That's why I'm focused on other things here this summer in Baltimore Positive. I'm focused on making the city better, which, quite frankly, is what I was focused on in 2006 when I did the Free the Birds walkout, if you go back and read any of my 19 chapters. So, I would say that, this will not inspire most people, but if you are a baseball nerd, it's an interesting experiment that these men from Houston have come in here to deal with this family and try to figure it out. That's all. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. We're going to nerd it up more. We're going to get into pitch clocks, game changes, all of that stuff. Believe me, if you love baseball, you're still going to love us. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at the Curio Wellness Center in Timonium. The holistic spa with the top-of-the-line products with experienced pros. Yes, they have medical cannabis, but they have so much more. Professional-grade vitamins, herbal supplements. They're right on York Road, just south of Timonium Road, and they're inviting you to stop in. Friendly, knowledgeable staff. Knowledgeable is the important part here. They're committed to cannabis education, but also ways to feel better. Brian Sanderhoff's been doing this as a traditional pharmacist, a holistic pharmacist, and now is there to help you at Curio Wellness. Come on in and experience the Curio way. I'll be wearing the shirt later on this week. Also, our friends in Essex at Pat Rick's, my old stomping grounds right on Eastern Avenue. Cold beer, great bands, never a cover, always warm inside on these cold nights. And the Thursday, they got steak dinner and prime rib, just $11.99. Monday's taco night, shrimp night on Tuesday, and wings on Wednesday. It's Pat Rick's of Essex, my side of town. Also, Sporticulture, they have promised me the lava lamps here before the owners' meeting, so I'm looking forward to that. Usually have some flowers around me on the set. You've seen them. They're beautiful. Spring is sprung. The flowers can be delivered at Sporticulture.com. It's local, but they send them anywhere and everywhere. You can even send a Steelers flower to your favorite former Antonio Brown team. Sporticulture.com. Luke is Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget, the buyatoyota.com audio vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.